you. My name is Ludwig Segele. I'm the online business and finance editor of The Economist, which doesn't sound much like I'm doing a lot about cities, but I'm also the person at The Economist that kind of focuses on cities and urbanization. And there's an article in The Economist about that field, the risks are high that it's by me. So this, I'm going to keep this short because we're short on time. This city is about this panel is about the cities of the future, or the future of cities. And what I'm trying to achieve here is that you take away kind of some ideas how the cities in the future will look like. So we have a great lineup to give us some ideas, and I would please ask my panel to come on stage here. So we have Hila Oren. She is actually an entrepreneur and innovator, but she has dedicated herself to public service. She is the CEO of the Tel Aviv Global City, and that's a body whose mission is to turn Tel Aviv into Israel's global city, or to put it differently, I mean, the ambition is to create Europe's San Francisco. We have Parks Tau, who's down there, is going to come up on stage soon. He is the mayor of Johannesburg, and he actually is, I may say this, he's only 41 years old, but he's worked in the City Hall in Joburg for over 10 years, and he'll talk to us about how to get Joburg ready for the future. We have Pedro Miranda of Siemens. I think he's already been introduced. We have John Reeds. John Reeds works for the Center of Advanced Spatial Analysis, and that is a department of the University College London. And his work is in a way, he's already in the future of cities. He works on data exhaust. He's trying to analyze all kinds of data that's oozing out of urban systems, in particular London's underground system. And finally, we have Muck Petzet. He's an architect based in Munich. He has curated or commissioned the German contribution to the Biennale in Venice, the Architectural Biennale in Venice. And the mantra of this contribution was reduce, reuse, and recycle. So, Hila, since you are the only one who has actually a real presentation with slides and all that fancy stuff, why don't you start?
Thank you so much. Would you, from here, from there, how would you prefer me? Well, anyhow, thank you so much for everybody's here. Can I have the slides, please? I want to get you familiar a little bit with Tel Aviv, and if you see the first one, you understand that we're talking about cracking the innovation code, looking from a different angle at the city, exploring it. Can I need the flicker, please. Where's the flicker? The flicker. Sorry. Okay. So, when we talk about a city, okay, we always talk about location. Of course, Tel Aviv is situated right at the middle of the world, if you want to look at it that way. Sorry. And that is prime location. But if we want to talk about the cities of the future, we should first of all understand the DNA of a city. Each one of you that sits here should ask himself, what are the facts? What is like the skeleton of the city? Tel Aviv is old and new. Jaffa is 5,000 years. Tel Aviv is only 100 years, and people went out of the borders. It is flat and it is sunny, so bicycle is of course appreciated. It is a very young city. 33% of the whole city are youngsters, and it's an entrepreneurial city. 100 years ago, 66 families, you'll hear it later from our mayor, they actually made their dreams come true. This is our city. Bauhaus design. It was UNESCO taught it as a World Heritage Site, 2003, 10 years ago. Since then, people from all over the world, architecture, come to Tel Aviv to learn and to understand and to cherish Bauhaus. 14 kilometers of beaches. Again, other cities have beaches, but the Tel Aviv beach, of course, is the most beautiful, but again, it's part of our skeleton. It's part of our DNA. If we finish talking about DNA, then we can jump to the personality of the city, because once you understand the facts, once you understand how it is built, you can go into the personality of the city. What is our personality? In Tel Aviv, It is, of course, a startup city, again, as we talked about, entrepreneurial, innovative, vibrant, very pluralistic. It's a non-stop city. It's a 24/7. You can walk 2 a.m. at Rothschild Boulevard, you'll feel very safe. So when you conclude both as a business center of Tel Aviv and as the culture center, whoever had a chance to go to the new modern museum will probably agree with me that the combination of culture and business is what makes our city part of the global cities. And now when we go into different examples, when you think about global cities, Saskia Sassen will be here later on, and we all know what she talks about in Richard Florida, that says that actually the global cities attract creative class. We all know that talent and technology is a must, but that is promoting, that is nurturing those things. That is, as I say, top down. What I think we should focus on is on the tolerance, on the bottom up, on listening. And this is what I want to talk about. Creating the space for our people, for our citizens, opening for the creative class. This is, by the way, just the students of architecture putting all their new ideas in the middle of town. What you see here is a duck sitting on the mayor's office, literally, on the centennial year. A group of citizens, cartoons that loved this icon and made it the icon of the town, Tel Aviv Municipality building. If you'll come into the municipality, again, another entrepreneurial of an artist. The accelerator is with an art that was made just a year ago. A library. Who doesn't know libraries that over there the librarian tells you, shh? Well, we took one that is on 8th floor, beautiful scenery to the sea, and we changed it. We looked at it out of the box, and now it's a startup. Yesterday I was here at the Google campus tech. They were all telling us how they are inspired by this library already. 1 year in a month from now, I'm inviting you. This is how we promote technology and talent. Again, thinking out of the box. It's quite humid, it's quite sunny in Tel Aviv. Let's make a night run instead of a sunny run. Nike did it in Tel Aviv and then went with it all around the world. Redefining the city. We all know flea markets all over the world, but now the hottest spot in Tel Aviv is the flea market at night because it's open. That's the vision of my mayor. He always thinks that when you put on the light at night, you put the violence away. Wherever there is light at night, people can walk, people can feel safe. The flea market, I beg you all to come. You won't believe what is going on there. The farm and the city, community gardens, again, another project. Accessible art, you know, piano around town all over the world, Tel Aviv again. Those are samples from Tel Aviv, but we can see samples like that all over the world. Liverpool was capital of culture 2008. Anybody was there when the giant spider went? The whole town made crazy. Why? Because people felt they can explore this city. They felt it's an actually playground. This is what the future cities we want them. We don't want them top down, just the money pouring down. We want the citizen to feel they can be part of it. Of course, the High Line, but not that is the important project, because that we all know already. The Low Line, the new project that is going on, whoever doesn't know, Google it up, it's brilliant. Amsterdam, piano stairs to encourage people to go by stairs. London, when I was at the Tate Gall, whoever thinks of coming into a museum and not being quiet and not doing what you're supposed to be do, and then to think that you can have slides. Anyone had those slides? Went down them in the Tate Modern? I did it. What was it? It was the best, right? So it's just different way of looking at a place. And just last week, Berlin is celebrating its 775 years anniversary. 775, that city. But what they emphasize is celebrating diversity. They put all their immigrants and made them heroes, made them superstars. That's how, and they put them in the middle of the town. So to conclude, what I would like to say is to combine talent, technology, and tolerance, the 3 T's of Richard Florida, to one thing, the diversity. This is how new cities, future cities will really go. We have to open them. This is Rabin Square with a beautiful flower carpet. open to ideas. This is how we can engine our economy. Open to everyone, to gay, to lesbians. Everyone should feel free everywhere, anywhere. Tolerance, pluralism, not only a saying, really do it. Open to the future. And if we're talking about future cities, if we're talking about connectivity, I want to ask you all to join us on next DLD, which is going to be in October in Tel Aviv on our city summit, and learn more from each other, because I must tell you, 2 years ago, I knew nothing of what I just told you. And in the last 2 years, I've just been going all around towns, exploring, learning, listening, making friends, and this is, I think, the way that our new future cities will flourish.
Thanks, Hila. Though I'm a bit surprised by your presentation. I mean, I always thought that Tel Aviv was already at the center of kind of one of the leading tech clusters. So why do you need what you're doing?
I think it's like, we feel that the Tel Aviv is already known in a very, very small party, in a very small friendship, but actually the secret is not yet out. We don't have a lot of people in Tel Aviv. Students don't come to learn yet. Startups, already we're hearing that it's a big thing, but they don't come to work for us at startups. Not enough tourists. How many of the people here have been to Tel Aviv? Okay, that's a lot, but still, they're all my friends. They came for me, but still half did not raise their hands. If it's such a big thing, then why aren't everybody in Tel Aviv? So I'm happy that here people have been to Tel Aviv, but the truth is the numbers are that it's far from there. And I beg you all to spread out the word. This is what we need.
Thank you, Hila. Mr. Tal. Of course, Joburg is quite different from Tel Aviv, and the set of challenges you face to turn your city into a city of the future are quite different. I mean, if you could kind of lay out your plans of how to kind of turn, or what you think the future of Joburg will be.
Well, thank you. Am I on? Thank you, and good morning to everybody. We think that in the city of Johannesburg, we're on the verge of, in fact, positioning ourselves as a world-class African city and positioning the city as a platform from which you can define future growth and future cities. And we have the opportunity in that context to have learned from those that have been there before us and to be able to leapfrog in certain instances where other cities have gone, because we might not have reached that stage. In the context of our discussions this morning, we think that, for example, the liberalization of telecommunications industry in the country in the past 5 years has created enormous opportunity for the city to define itself as a smart city. For us, smart cities is an integral part of the city strategy. It is part of what we've defined in our Joburg 2040 strategy, and we've taken advantage of the liberalization of the telecommunications industry to build an infrastructure of fiber in the city that is putting us on a platform from which we can be able to define a city that grows at the back of ICT industry, green economy, and essentially economies of the future. So that's how we're defining the role of our city going forward. Of course, because the liberalization has been fairly recent, there's been a bit of a stampede all over each other. Both private and public sector players investing in infrastructure and in certain instances digging trenches past each other. Which is not the most efficient way that things could have happened. But what that gives us an opportunity to do now is to take advantage of that infrastructure that everybody has. Having laid out the infrastructure as the city, it's now the opportunity for us to say, what do we invest and allow both public and private sector investors to be able to take advantage of that infrastructure. Excuse me. Maybe a bit of water. Now, as a city, we have a private telecommunications license, which license essentially we received in the past 4 years that has allowed us to invest in the broadband infrastructure. The license allows us to utilize as a private telecommunications license to invest in internal infrastructure for the municipality, on which basis we'd be able to improve our public service provisioning to our residents, but it also allows us to on-sell excess capacity. So the strategy is on 3 legs. The one is we have a license for internal ICT. We can use that for public interest, but then we can on-sell excess capacity, which gives opportunities for telcos in the city to take advantage of the opportunities that are presented there. Elements of our smart city strategy include a smart safety initiative that we've entered into a relationship with the private sector to roll out and pilot a smart safety platform looking at CCTV integration. We've got a CCTV platform. It's about ensuring that there's intelligent cameras and intelligent technologies that would be able to bring together all sorts of elements that can improve public safety in our city. There's smart metering technology that we're now rolling out. We'll be spending the next 2 years investing in smart metering, and at the back of that, a smart grid technology that we can extend to communities. And lastly, it's about ensuring that we can use technology and the license that we have to bridge the digital divide, because in our context, bridging the digital divide is important. Whilst a lot of people in Johannesburg have access to technology, have access to the World Wide Web infrastructure, etc., moving into 4G and other technology opportunities, there's still a significant number of people in our country that do not have access to ICT. And this gives us a platform from which we can break or bridge the digital divide, and that's very important for us.
Your vision of the city of the future, of the smart city of Joburg, seems to be technology is very important. What do you tell people who say, I mean, actually, I've been to Joburg and understand that question I mean, what Joburg needs is not necessarily more technology. It needs perhaps a more socially sustainable development. I mean, is technology what will make Joburg smart?
No, I think what we're saying is, for us, smart city is an integral part of the growth and development strategy. So it's not standing outside the city's overall growth and development strategy. Our growth and development strategy is premised on the need to build Johannesburg into a livable, sustainable, and resilient city. Our Joburg 2040 strategy is underpinned by the elements of social development, economic development, sustainable infrastructure provision, and good governance. Those would be the 4 pillars of our strategy, the 4 key outcomes that define what we'll be doing. And we see smart city and technology as an integral part and not sitting outside the city strategy. Our agenda is ultimately about socio-economic transformation in the context of our city, social cohesion, social development, eradicating poverty and creating employment are the critical elements of what we need to define as a city of the future.
Thank you, Parks. Pedro, you're kind of like the arms merchant here, so the Siemens builds these solutions, these products that are supposed to make cities smart. I mean, what can you, for example, offer to Joburg to make it smarter? I think smart grids is
yes. Well, getting back to basics, you know, what do we need in cities is energy. We need the water. We need resources like natural gas. We need to have, when you go home, you need to have a connectivity to the IT, be it the web or other. So the very basic principles is that you need very simple supplies, but they have to be steady and they have to work. You know, this is how the efficiency of cities differentiates one from the other, is that if you don't have blackouts, if you have clean water, if you have energy which is always there, people want to move there, and also they progress more. For example, if you have water which is not filtered and you use it in schools, immediately your rate of bacteria infection in kids is tremendous. You know, we have huge examples in Africa and also in India that the water is not being treated, so the basic need of water has to be taken care. So I would say in Africa, it would be very important to make sure there is technology available to make water captation, be it locally or remotely, transported with control, be it of bacteria indices, but also to make sure that the water at the point of use is clean, fresh, and safe. So this is a little bit getting back to basics. And this is what people need, is clean water in Africa. And if you are able to get the water to every single home in an African family. This is a huge progress on healthcare, on longevity, and also on people feeling much safer on those environments. This is an example that I think a company like Siemens, but many others could help. The second point is that you need to bring energy. And energy is the key and is the heart of the development world. That means even the developing countries need more and more stable energy. If you take a look at mature cities, most of them have a very good electrical infrastructure, because this is how modern world works. We produce, so we generate energy very efficiently, we transmit very efficiently, but we consume very poorly. That means most of the advances was in generation of energy, be it now the renewables or with fossil generation. But where the problem resides is on smart consumption. That means we have very erratic patterns of consuming energy in our homes, in our residential buildings. So what a company like Siemens can do for the city is to make a guidance, to give ideas how to consume smartly. And consume smartly is to decrease, for example, the kilowatt hour consumption per square meter of buildings. This is a huge impact, for example, in environmental care. 40% of the energy consumption in the world is done on buildings. And those 40% make a correlation of CO2 emissions equivalent of about 21%. So we have to balance all this. It's a very complex game, and I don't think anybody has the key for all the answers, but we should go back to basics. You know, I was here with UN Habitat General Secretary Johan Close, and he said, let's get to basics. Let's get to the KPIs which really make the difference. And there was a lot of discussions with regards to urban planning and urban design. We have to get back to designing correctly. Designing with planning and planning cycles that make sense for the people too. So I would not like to give a specific answer what we can do for Johannesburg, but for sure, companies like Siemens can help Johannesburg plan probably in a more global way. That means getting the best practice. Of course, we will not use the same solutions we did in Oslo or we did in London, because the maturity of the city is different. And also the density, as we saw today, it plays a very important role on efficiency of the city. But what we can bring is, and I think we Europeans or our colleagues in Asia, and we should work together to have more information available for cities which are really facing the challenges of clean water, of stable energy, of having IT available. If you put, for example, if you take a relationship between the use of IT, mobile IT, and the availability of fresh water, it's a big disparity. That means all of us have mobile phones, all of us have IT, because it's very easy to lay cables, communication cables in cities. You just have to open up very small parts of the city to get a cable in. But if you need water, if you need natural gas, if you need electrical cables, this is a completely different story. So I think our societies went very fast on communications, on mobile connectivity, and we forgot the basics. So I think this is now a paradigm shift, because it's not sustainable to have a development of the world as it is. It's consuming too much, it's consuming poorly, it's very erratic. And the resources, you know, I was listening to a professor from London School of Economics. He said we need 1.5 planets at the moment. And if we consume like the North Americans, it's about 5 planets. If we consume like the Europeans, it's 3 planets. That means there are other areas of the world which are consuming, let's say, 0.2 and 0.3, because the average is 1.5. So we need to take a more, let's say, a more sensible approach to these issues, not trying to say that this is the way, because every city is a city. You know, Tel Aviv, completely different from Lisbon, where I was born, and you cannot replicate 100% your solutions, because the people have to say, well, you have the basics, that's water, that's energy, that's connectivity, that's services, that's transport, but we all have our culture, and this plays a big importance. I give you an example. the government of India is trying to connect Delhi with Mumbai. And they want to build 20 cities of 1 to 2 million inhabitants in that corridor. You know, this is a huge change. That means this will change the whole, let's say, way of living in India. So this is the chance. This is the chance for us to build those cities, which will be between 20 and 25, in the next 20 years, correctly. And maybe that's where the companies like Siemens can help.
Thank you, Pedro. John, I mean, I said you're kind of already living in the future. You get lots of data and trying to make sense of that data. Data exhaust, it's called. I mean, tell me what you have done recently. I mean, I think you got lots of data from Transport for London, which is the company that runs the London Underground system.
Yes, so if you've traveled here by Oyster Card, thank you for taking part in my experiment. But essentially, actually, I wanted to start off, though, with perhaps what might seem a bit of a controversial statement, given that there are some architects in the audience, which is that I think the cities of tomorrow are going to look a lot like the cities of today. And the reason I say that is that if you were to take a map of London from 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and if you especially focused on that core network, the part where the business of London has always happened, you know, it hasn't changed. The links, and it's not that the buildings haven't changed, but the relationships between them were laid down, you know, in some cases hundreds of years ago. The relationship between sort of, you know, whether it's Westminster over to, you know, over to the palace, but, you know, thinking more actively about business, those links are they're stable in a way that kind of the activity that happens around them is not, but they very powerfully structure that activity. So that's why I think, you know, the London of 100 years from now will be one that we actually could navigate in very much the same way that we navigate London today. So the implication of that, to my mind, is that, you know, we're going to have to keep using a lot of the infrastructure that we have now for, you know, indefinitely, and we're going to have to find ways to squeeze out, you know, more capacity, more reliability, more access out of these same kind of already what sometimes seem like very limited resources. So I think for that reason, there are two words that need to be an essential part of our vocabulary moving forward when we're thinking about cities, and one is retrofitting, so finding ways to kind of embed technology in these older systems. I know there's some examples across the way from Siemens, you know, putting in driverless trains on the #1 line in Paris, things like that, which can help squeeze out more capacity. And the second way to do that is through data and through basically being a lot smarter about what the data that we get, what we do with the data these systems are generating. So in that sense, a little bit like what Carlo was saying, and trying to see how we activate the feedback effect of that. And so I'm only going to talk about the data bit because that's my area. And the Olympics were really kind of a fascinating case of, you know, sort of, if you wanted to upset everything that Londoners do on a day-to-day basis and see what happens, throw the Olympics into the mix. And this was a system that has enough trouble coping with, you know, the normal number of Londoners, which is about sort of 3 million, trying to get to and from their places of work every day. And now you want to add in sort of 300,000 spectators on top of that. No system was going to cope with that. You simply couldn't invest for that. So what Transport for London needed was a strategy to manage demand, and they needed to manage it in a set of very active ways. And in retrospect, I mean, we you know, it was the predictions were a bit for the London equivalent of LA's, you know, Carmageddon. But much like what happened in LA, this kind of threatened, you know, total gridlock, complete meltdown never happened. And that was because, in a way, people took these messages on board and they reacted. And there were really three parts of that strategy that really were very effective. One was, you know, try to reduce demand, try to get people to work from home as much as possible. If they have to come into work, try to get them to travel at a different time of day, try to get them out of that rush hour crunch, whether it's, you know, coming into work or apparently propping up the British beer industry by staying for a pint after work. And the third part of that, which was really, you know, quite interesting, and I think is kind of unstated in some ways, although it's implicit in what Ricky was saying in the opening talk, is the spatial distribution of these events was also key. I mean, the fact that we only really had a couple of events in downtown London meant that most people who were staying in downtown London, if they had an event there, they walked, if they were spectators in an event there, they walked to it. But most of the other flows were actually heading in the exact opposite direction to the commuters. So there was this lovely kind of balance set up whereby, yeah, the trains were crowded going out to the venues, but they weren't crowded with people trying to get to work. So I think the combination of those three things is really what helped, really what makes like a good illustration of how integrated planning, thinking about where things are, what's happening there, and how you get people to think about their journey differently are really sort of is part of that way forward for getting more out of the infrastructure that we have today.
Thanks, Don. I remember you telling me that you got a whole bunch of data from TfL, Oyster card data. The Oyster cards are for those of you who don't live in London, the Oyster card is how we pay when we go into the tube. And you got that data. Have you already kind of sifted through that, and what kind of are the results? I mean, has let's say demand management worked in this case?
Yeah. Well, we're still. I mean, the Paralympics really only just having ended. We're still kind of getting to grips with it. But I mean, certainly, the interesting thing is that. I was working on this largely on my own, and then kind of coordinating with TfL to see if what I was finding was lining up with what they were finding, and it seems to work quite well. So the headline number that Transport for London has is that about 30% of people change their behavior in some way. So they might have changed their route, their time, or they might have just traveled less. What I was doing was really trying to say, okay, let's take these people who use their Oyster cards and let's put them into different categories. So I had a category of people who really depend on the public transit system. They use it every single day, at least 5 days a week, in some cases even more. And then we have so we'll call those people, dedicated commuters. And then another group that sort of uses it maybe 1 to 3 times a week, but it's a bit unpredictable. There's a lot of variance there. Dedicated commuters are about 2.25 million people. So every day, those 2.25 million people, you can pretty much predict that they're going to be using the tube to get to and from their place of work. For them, in each of the weeks of the main games, only about 5% didn't travel. Now, 5% of 2.25 million is still a very large number, but it's a very small slice of people who changed. And since these are the people who traveled at rush hour, you may recall the scenes of kind of half-deserted trains during rush hour in London. And so if you can get that little tiny behavioral change embedded, it seems to have produced an absolutely massive difference. The other group, the group which had more variability, was the group, for them, something like 50% changed their behavior in important ways. So where people have variability, where they have choice, where they're sort of empowered to make decisions by their company, by the nature of their work, maybe they're freelancers, things like that, they really took control and said, you know what, I'm just not traveling. It's, until I know what's happening, I'm just not going to go anywhere. And so there we saw really, really big changes. In terms of the demand shifting in time, one of the great things that you can see is in the Oyster data is, first of all, you can see the British review of the opening ceremonies, which is transport basically, the transport was empty when the opening ceremonies start, drops to almost nothing. And as soon as the kind of the Danny Boyle opening show finishes, there's this sort of gradual ramp up as people go, I don't really need to watch all the athletes march in. And so people just take off. And then there's another pause as people wait. But the really interesting thing happens on the next Monday, which is people took TfL's advice. They said, I'm going to allow a little extra time till I know how things work. You have a big, big travel spike of people who normally travel later in the day, traveling half an hour early, 45 minutes earlier. They realize, actually, it's really quite unpleasant. And that spike disappears completely. So people responded very, very quickly to their perception of the system around them. And I think that's one of the other really interesting things about data activating the feedback element of it, which was people gauged very quickly whether they really needed that extra half an hour to get to work, and they didn't. So they sort of went straight back to their old habits, although there's still a little bit of detectable change. And I think, I'm just trying to have a look at my notes here. I think probably the real legacy of this is in a sense this data set of you rarely get a chance to plan for kind of a whole new you could think of Stratford as having been a whole new commuter hotspot for a period of 2 weeks. You don't normally build a suburb, test it out for a couple weeks, and then go back to life as normal. So I think but what we actually have now in this Oyster card data set is this sort of view of what might it look like if Stratford were an employment hotspot and people were trying to get there to work rather than head out and into the center of town for work. And I think that sort of view gives you just a little bit of insight into the future through data.
Thanks, John. Muck, you are blessed, and it's not because what you're going to say is interesting, but your approach is somewhat different. I mean, you have decidedly, I would say, low-tech approach. Reduce, reuse, recycle. So you want to actually take the cities as they are and improve them.
Yeah, so actually I want to kind of continue with your thoughts. As you said, back to basics, and you just didn't mention buildings, for example. So I would say this is... Yeah, thank you so much. And I think this is also a very important basic. And your thought of the importance of intelligent transformation strategies. Because actually I have a kind of a strange mission as an architect here, because I'm saying often it's good not to build and use something which is already there. I think this is, in our times, this is much cleverer than always thinking when you hear innovation, you're always thinking, oh, new and shiny. And it's also actually, if you watch the film, which you, very interesting film, which you present here, if you watch yourself, you always look at these new and shiny pieces, and actually, in between, the thing is that matters for me. That's my point here. And actually also, without being impolite, I would say also this crystal here is a bit of an example of this kind of old school innovation thinking. Yeah, it has to be new and shiny to show I'm innovative, and maybe it would have been actually, especially in a European city, for example in Germany, okay, we are really shrinking society, it's just below 2% of the whole building bulk when you work with new buildings. You have kind of the leverage of below 2% what you can change for the whole building stock. So you have to work with the existing buildings, intelligent, like you said, getting things better with the existing and working very intelligent with this. More like influencing behavior, as you're saying. This is such a big leverage. And so I was thinking when I saw this crystal, you could have found some beautiful existing derelict structure in London, I would have guessed, and change this to show the importance. Just a hint. Okay. So.
Let him finish.
Yeah. So this is kind of the message. Very simple, because we kind of, as a game, we introduced these principles of waste, the waste hierarchy, into architecture, like the hierarchy to say reduce, reuse, recycle means avoidance comes first. So first think, like Cedric Price was always propagating, first think whether you need an architect after all, and then whether maybe there's some structure already there which could be used for the new need, and maybe even adapt your behavior. Then not adapt the building, which is very expensive and takes a lot of energy, but maybe adapt the behavior. And what also very important point is that you have always to think about the lots of energies, different energies that are stored in the existing building fabric, in the existing infrastructure, it's really energy stored there, and it's social energy. But if you just dismantle things very senselessly, you kind of put this energy in the air. So rethink.
Well, this is very challenging. Thank you very much. Well, let's be more practical. You know, we had an opportunity here in London, given also by the mayor Boris Johnson, and also the mayor of the borough of Newman, Sir Robin Wales, to build something which will attract more green businesses to this area, which is, you have seen, a very depressed economic area. So from the beginning, and our company has real estate all over the world. We have real estate in Indonesia, in South Africa, in South America, in Mexico City, in US. You know, we have hundreds and hundreds of buildings which belong to us, which do not look like this. So this was the opportunity. We had a restriction of height and of perimeter. That means there is an airport, London City, so we cannot build on height. We have also restrictions on power lines, which are going to the left and right. And we have also transportation curbsides and train curbsides. So that means the geometry of this building was very much conditioned on height and on perimeter. The second point was that the borough of Newman wanted to make a park for the citizens. You know, this used to be, let's say, an empty space. We had some boats here for the rowing team of Newman, which was using the left side as on your back. And then we decided, okay, so let's make here a community project where people can do some agriculture, some basic agriculture. If you see on the side of the beach, we have some space for having the citizens from Newman to actually engage in community planting. That means the real estate value, it's enormous. And we have decided to make, let's say, local harvesting of local food. So all of this is a plan between Siemens and the politicians. I think in the end, this is a very exciting place because technology, you mentioned energy savings. This will be one of the most efficient buildings in the world. That means I don't want to bother you with all the technology that we have here, but the consumption per square meter will be 50% below a standard modern building as we know it today. And we have put, just for your information, we have about 2,000 sensors in the building, around about 12,000 control points. That means this building is highly efficient. It has an integration of renewables on the ceiling. It collects all the water. That means we do not use water from the city. That means we use the water that rains on our roofs. We purify the water. We use it for irrigation and our needs. So I think we want also to have here a showcase of technology for, let's say, building new buildings, but also I agree with you that old buildings need to be retransformed. They need to be retrofitted, like we say. And I could give you actually the number of retrofitted buildings that we did in the world is close to 6,200 buildings. Alone in the US, we have retrofitted 3,300 buildings. That means exactly what you say. Take an old building, retrofit, have the KPIs from energy lowered, and this is, let's say, this is the reality. So I do not put your question at all as a let's say out of time and out of line, but this is the truth.
Okay, Hila, I think.
I'd like to refer to what you said because it was provocative. Is it okay? Because it was provocative, but I'll take you to an image of cities as wardrobe. You know what we like to wear. I think we love to wear new things and we love to wear our old things. In both of them, we feel comfortable. And I think this is what about cities. We have to use old buildings, of course, to give them new lives, etc., etc. But I think we also like the new shiny things. We want to be attracted. We want to be something, to feel something to look up to. And as a whole, that's our wardrobe. Sorry for the feminine way.
I just want to finish because I think it's relevant. You know, when you take a look at the glasses, you know, this building is only glass. There is no cement outside, no bricks, no other materials. the inclination of this crystal is designed so the sun, as you know, when incident in the surface can either reflect or refract. And this has been designed by our engineers and architects to make sure that the amount of light that comes in is correlated with the needs that we have. So this is a very pleasant place to work, but you really get with the sunshine cycle the amount of light which we need to work. And alone in that measure, we save 10 to 15% energy costs.
Marks, do you think a building like that would or we'll see more buildings like that in Joburg in the future, or is smartness defined different?
Well, firstly, I think that the debate is very important because it allows, I think, exploring both what you mean in terms of the future, but also how you incorporate your past into your future, because you can't always try and define a new future. You always have to incorporate your past into the future. And in a city context, brownfields and retrofit are an integral part of what we need to do, because if we're to optimize the use of our infrastructure, if we are to incorporate what we currently have into our future, we are going to have to look actively at retrofit and brownfield initiatives so that we can build a city of the future. In Johannesburg, you're having a lot of appetite for new, and that's part of the challenge that we face. The property developers, the entrepreneurs are all pursuing new. And many of them do not have appetite for retrofit and brownfields. It's left to government. It's a challenge that we as the city have to confront. And continuously we have to find ways of incentivizing and encouraging property owners to get into brownfields initiatives and to retrofit their buildings. And in the old developed parts of the city, you're finding some levels of decay because property owners simply move on to the next property. New is better, and that's what developers want to do. And I do think that we need to continuously find ways of getting them back into, well, we still need to optimally utilize the infrastructure that we have and ensure that its sustainability. And then we can resolve problems of the inefficiencies that you have in current infrastructure, but you can't discard it.